But Jan's in the waiting room. She's texting me, asking if somebody let her in.
Does she know the secret password?
And I'll go ahead and admit. Yep, we got a few more now.
There's
too.
Bruce, so we're good to go.
Great.
We're good to go. Okay. Let's open this meeting. Hello, I am Deb Stidham, and I serve as chairperson for the Kansas Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. I ask that the members of the board to respond to a roll call to signify their presence at this open meeting that is being conducted remotely by conference call and other electronic medium. David Anderson.
Present.
Daniel Johnson.
Here.
Mary Jones.
Here.
Jacqueline Lightcap.
Here.
Bruce Nystrom.
Here.
Laura Shaughnessy.
Here.
Rick Steele.
Here.
Carolyn Zaspran.
Here.
Donna Norton.
Here.
Andrea Perdomo Morales.
Here.
Leslie C. Wester. Laura Shaughnessy.
Here.
I note that the following staff members are also present: David Fye,
Here.
Leslie Allen,
Here.
Ashley Van
Buskirk. Here.
Buskirk, Assistant Attorneys General Jan Arndt, Jane Weiler, and Lainey Bernard, who are assigned to the board as general counsel, are also present. Is that correct?
Lainey's not here. She had an emergency arise, so it's just Jane and I.
It's me, Lainey.
Oh,
I'm
there.
here. I'm just
Okay.
not on video.
Okay, I didn't think you were going to be here. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
David Fye will read a message concerning this meeting being held remotely.
All right, this is Dave Fye, Executive Director for the Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. Public comment allows the public to address the board about its concerns, but the Kansas Open Meeting Act (KOMA) does not require the board to provide public comment or answer questions from individuals. There will be no public comment at the meeting today to ensure adequate time for the items currently on the meeting's agenda. Because we are conducting this public meeting remotely by conference call and other teleconference ability, I state for the record the following information. Because the emergency declaration that was issued for the COVID-19 pandemic has been extended to March 31st, 2021, the meeting is being conducted remotely to comply with health and safety concerns, as the board's conference room cannot accommodate social distancing for everyone in attendance. However, access to the meeting is being conducted by medium of interactive communication that allows members of the public without cost to attend the meeting through the use of conference call and on the board's YouTube channel. While the meeting is conducted remotely, the requirements of the KOMA are not suspended. As such, we'll be conducting this meeting pursuant to KOMA and KAR 16-20-1 concerning compliance with the KOMA during the existing emergency disaster declaration. On February 8th, 2021, we sent notice to the board meeting to all individuals who requested notice of the board meetings. The notice was also posted on the board's website, ksbsrb.ks.gov. You may obtain a copy of the notice at that website. An agenda and other meeting material was posted on the board's website on the day of the meeting. You may also request a copy of the agenda by sending an email to david.fye@ks.gov with the subject line "Request for the agenda," and it will be sent to you. The notice contains information for the conference call and YouTube channel that allows the public to attend the meeting free of charge. The notice also states that if there are any technical issues during the meeting, you may call the board office at 785-296-3240. Each member of the board, staff, or presenter shall state the person's name and title each time the person speaks or votes. Each participant to the meeting shall ensure microphones, phones, and other electronic devices are on mute when the participant is not speaking. Each motion will be clearly stated before the board votes, and each board member will vote when their name is called. The chairperson will announce the result of the final vote. A statement or motion will clearly identify each member of the board or staff who the board delegates its authority to sign any binding document on behalf of the board. A recording of the meeting will be posted to the board's website. The board has the following items listed on the agenda: opening remarks by the board chair, agenda approval, review of legislation, and adjournment. The board's agenda does not include an executive session. If the board elects to go into an executive session, the board will follow the following process. First, the board will be in an open session before going into an executive session. Then a board member must make a motion to recess for an executive session that is seconded by another board member. Each board member will then vote. A majority of the board must vote in favor of the motion to exercise the executive session. The chair will announce the results of the vote. The motion must contain a statement of justification for closure and the subject for it to be discussed pursuant to KSA 75-43-19B. And the time and place the open meeting will resume. If a motion for executive session passes, the conference call will be placed on hold. Attendees will stay on the call or return to the conference call number at the expiration of the executive session or to return to the remainder of the meeting. The public will be excluded from the executive session portion of the meeting, as the executive session will be conducted by electronic means that is not available to the public. When the board members return to the conference call, the open meeting will resume through the conference call. The motion, complete motion for an executive session will be recorded in the minutes.
Okay. Do we have any changes to the agenda? All right, David?
Great. Well, Deb, I just wanted to go ahead and brief the members of the board concerning some legislation that was released at the end of last week and just make you aware of how that documentation and that legislation is proceeding and get some input from you in terms of if you want me to submit any legislation on behalf or any testimony rather on behalf of the board. So you should have received 4 different bills yesterday, and those are posted to our website. The first bill is House Bill 2206, and that is a bill that amends the Telemedicine Act. So this bill actually was scheduled for a hearing yesterday in the House Health and Human Services Committee that is chaired by Representative Brenda Landwehr. There was a great deal of testimony. The bill itself changes a number of definitions, and it adds a reference that through telemedicine, you can do some referral, and also it calls for some coordination of care between different types of providers that an individual has. But most of the testimony focused on items relating to the pandemic, such as individuals providing care and the desired payment parity that they were seeking. That's not actually included in the bill, but there were a number of individuals who testified in favor of that and asked that it be included. So there was a full day of testimony. And at the end of the testimony, basically the chair indicated that she would like to see the individuals who are in support of payment parity go forward and come to the table with a bill draft that would address that issue specifically. She said her initial plan was to continue the hearing today and then possibly work the bill. But after all the testimony, she said her plan for the immediate future is to not work the bill at this time, but to ask the advocates to go and come up with some additional legislation for consideration. So that's where that bill currently sits. Next, there was a bill that is House Bill 2207, and that is a bill prohibiting conversion therapy to minors. That bill is not scheduled for a hearing. I just want to let you know as well, that bill was actually introduced, or a similar bill was introduced last year, and it did have both a House version and a Senate version, but it didn't have a hearing last year. And so I'll just be keeping an eye on that bill because it does reference the BSRB. The next bill was our bill, House Bill 2208, and that is actually been scheduled for a hearing tomorrow, Thursday at 1:30 in the House Health and Human Services Committee. As I mentioned to you guys previously, there's also going to be a Senate version of the bill to allow the Senate Public Health and Welfare Committee to act on the bill if they want to go ahead and have hearings on that. There was a slight hiccup with the Office of the Revisers, but they confirmed with me yesterday that the bill is still going to be released on the Senate side. It just hasn't gone through officially being released yet. When I do get a bill number, I will let you all know. I have gone ahead and drafted some preliminary testimony as a proponent. My assumption was that you would like me to go ahead and speak in favor of the bill. So that is what I'm planning to do. That is going to be reviewed and then sent to the committee assistant. They've asked for the testimony by 10 a.m. today for the hearing tomorrow. And so the last bill that I just kind of wanted to reference, and I thought this might take the majority of the discussion by the board if you wanted to discuss this morning. The House Bill 2209 is a bill concerning SIPAC, and SIPAC it's a multi-state compact for licensed psychologists. That's known as the Psychology Interjurisdictional Compact. It establishes a home state for licensed psychologists, and then it allows telepsychology services within other states that belong to the compact. It also allows for 30 days of in-state practice. And there's an independent body in the bill that's established known as the Psychology Interjurisdictional Compact Commission that administers some items involved with the compact. As Rick mentioned, last night there was a licensed psychology advisory committee meeting that met and had a very good discussion of this bill. So I'm not going to get into that, but I'll go ahead and defer to you, Rick, in terms of the conversation. But in terms of the meeting this morning, I just wanted to go ahead, since this was scheduled very quickly, I just wanted to have a brief meeting with the board this morning to get your thoughts in terms of who you'd like me to submit testimony. If so, would you like me to submit it as a proponent, neutral, or an opponent? And then would you prefer that I submit it as written only, or go ahead and speak after I submit the testimony? So I just wanted to bring this to your attention for conversation. We did ask the legal counsel for the board to go ahead and review the bill, so they are aware of the items in the bill, and they might be able to provide some further clarity. So with that, I'll just go ahead and I'll defer to anyone who wants to speak on this or,
Well, I
Rick?
can, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I was going to ask you to speak.
I can start and try to just summarize the advisory committee's position. The advisory committee recognizes that there could be some advantages to SIPACT in theory, specifically for people who are underserved in rural areas in the state. However, the advisory committee unanimously had concerns about this version of the bill, specifically in three areas. First is the lack of specificity regarding several aspects of the investigative process of out-of-state psychologists who would provide services to Kansans under the provisions of this bill. It's just murky and it's not clear. We got some good information from Cindy and a lot from Jan and Jane regarding that actually confirmed some of our fears about the bill that we have known about SIPACT, for years actually, and talked about it in multiple advisory committee meetings, but that lack of specificity regarding that was concerning. Number two, there was concerns regarding economic impact. The bill provides for no fees that would go to the state from out-of-state psychologists who would be providing services in the state, which could result in investigatory processes that are underfunded, right? So if we're having to investigate out-of-state psychologists and there's nothing coming in, that's unfortunate, and it's not necessarily good for the BSRB. And then third, and maybe this is the one that's closest to my heart, is the lack of clarity regarding processes that consumers would use to lodge complaints. It's unclear how exactly consumers in other states who are receiving services from Kansans or Kansans who are receiving services from psychologists out of state, whether they would understand the processes necessary to lodge a complaint and how that would be made clear to them. Those are, I mean, if there are several of you, Johnny, you were at the meeting, Jane, anyone else could expand on those. That's just how I summarized the primary areas of concern.
Anyone else?
On into all the details, I think, Rick pretty well summed it up for the lack of specificity that this had, especially when you compare it to other compacts that there's several other boards have.
So as a result of that, the board or the advisory committee unanimously opposes the bill and has asked me to ask the board to oppose the bill.
Who put the bill forward? Do we know?
KPA.
Have we had any discussions with them? Are they going to be open to amendments or?
I don't know. They didn't share the bill with us at all. They just introduced it
That's
directly. And so I don't know exactly what the thinking was. We had two advisory committee meetings about SIPACT in October and in July. And prior to that, several others. I learned about this bill last week when David sent it to me. So I don't know exactly what KPA's plan was as far as coordinating with BSRB, but it didn't involve me. So that's okay. They don't have to involve me, but
Well, it can sometimes make for smoother sailing when you get in front of committees. So, okay.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify something from my end too. So when I spoke to the board back in January, I mentioned that there might be times that individuals might reach out to me for the board's opinion, and I was seeking some clarity in terms of, if there hasn't been a formal board opinion, how to respond to some of those items. And so there was a draft of the bill that was provided to me right before the board meeting in January, but it was a draft made by the revisers. That was not an official bill draft. And so there was some concern that it would potentially be a work product of the attorney for the legislature. And so I sought some clarity on that to see if that was something I could share. But, that came out the day before that meeting, and I didn't want to violate anything to do with confidentiality or anything like that. So I just wanted to be upfront in terms of that and just, what I received and why, I didn't feel like it was appropriate. And I talked to the individual who was supporting the bill, and I said, as soon as there is an official bill, something public that I could share, I'm happy to do that with the board. So just wanted to relay that from me. So.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I understand the process. There was months that the KPA could have said something or asked something or asked to work with the advisory committee or the board, and they chose not to. So
I'm going to ask a hypothetical, Rick, primarily for you. If some of these technical pieces were corrected, are you in support, your advisory committee in support of this as a concept for Kansas?
I think there are some advantages to having this for rural Kansans and people who may not have access to some services. I conceptually can get there. I've known about SIPAC since before the first state signed on, and I have always had some concerns about how consumers, I have always had some concerns about how consumers will deal with this in terms of if I've got a client, in Baldwin, and they're seeing someone in Tallahassee, Florida, electronically, is it their job to understand that they should really call the state board in Florida if there's a problem? Right. So conceptually, that's my issue with it. Is there a bill that could address all of this? Probably. I just don't know that it could be done right now. I think I would like to see some work on this over some time. That was my opinion. And I don't want to take too much of our time because this isn't a therapy session. After the July and October meetings, where we had several people that are experts in telemedicine join our group to talk to us about this, it actually moved me closer to neutral, right? I started out this process not really being a big proponent at all of this. They moved me a lot closer. After hearing the concerns that our legal team offered last night, I'm kind of back to where I started, that I think this needs a lot of work. I would not be supportive of just kicking this back and letting them try to fix it during this session. I think this takes more work than that. That's a very long answer. I'm sorry, but
no, it's totally appropriate.
My little personal journey with SIPAC.
Well, I think it's a good one because I think you're closest to the issue, but I think we would probably have similar experiences. So we've done that as well. Comments from the board?
Well, I support Rick's reasoning and his concerns and the need to take the time to rework those areas before, pushing anything through at this point.
This is Mary. So I'm hearing the request from that advisory group to have David oppose the bill, and I would be in support of that.
I support that as well. Yes.
Me too.
All right, let's put it in form of a motion. Is that a first and a second? Come out and opposed to the board. David would provide testimony from the board, I should say. Hey, David Fye, can you let Leslie in, please?
Yes.
I say that perhaps the testimony, not to just, I think it needs to say more than you're opposed to it, because then they're going to think that you're against people coming in from other states and practicing, which is not, I don't think what the opposition is that there's not enough protections there for the public and to focus on that, and that you would like them to take more time to ensure that the public is protected through the process. And then that way, because they don't, that's all with legislation that they've had pending in the past, that they're more concerned about getting people licensed. So I think if you express that you're
Agreed.
not against that, you just want to protect the public, it will go over better.
Yeah, to be helpful, because I recognize that this is due in an hour and a half. I had drafted something last night after the meeting that I'm happy to send to, well, I could send it to all of you, but I could send it to Dave if that would be helpful. That specifically says that we're not conceptually opposed to out-of-state providers, but that this bill doesn't protect them for those 3 bulleted points that I listed above, and that we ask them to rework the bill, perhaps tabling it for this session, so that the sponsor can work with BSRB and the advisory board to craft a bill that meets their goals and protects the public.
Okay. Very good explanation of exactly what our opposition will entail. Thank you for writing that up, Rick.
Mhm.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Are there any opposed?
Opposed?
Okay. Any other? All right, motion carries. Let David propose that testimony, introduce it, I should say, for us.
Thank
Okay.
you. Dave, I'll send that right away if that's helpful. If it's not helpful, then just throw it away and don't tell me.
No, that's very helpful, Rick, and I appreciate that. Thank you. And that was the last bill that I was going to highlight. Just to let the board know, there are some bills that don't specifically tie to the BSRB in terms of, you know, the main topics for the bills, but there are some bills out there that do deal with regulatory boards. So I am watching those bills. You know, none of the bills that I've been watching have passed a chamber, but those bills are receiving hearings in terms of regulatory board regulations and different things like that. So I'll continue to monitor those. If any of those bills do pass a chamber, I will go ahead and I'll let you guys know.
Great.
This is this is Leslie. I have a question. Ashley's concerned with the minutes. Does she just put that it was not a motion, but a consensus
Correction.
of the board that you provide this testimony?
I'll defer to Jan.
So I mean, it doesn't hurt to say it's a motion. There's no strict rules about that. Just the main thing that the board agreed to send something, provide testimony to it.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Thanks for asking.
Ashley asked, so.
Well, thank you, Ashley.
Good question. Any other items, or should we adjourn?
Can I just
Yes.
ask a technical question on our bill? The one that's being reintroduced this year for my own knowledge. The beginning of the bill has an effective date of January 1, 2022. So if all of those things that we've put forth pass, like the hours specifically, would that not happen until 2022? It's just a technical clarification for me. Or is that only related to the social work clinical approved, board approved supervisor section?
If they're all in the same bill and the provision for the effectiveness of the bill, then that controls everything in that bill. And so consequently, it would be all the applications up to December 31st of 2021 would be under old law. And then everything that's received January 1 after that would be under the new law. That's kind of come up before. And so some people, where it benefited them, withdrew their application and then reapplied under the new law.
I don't want to take up too much of this time because we have a very short meeting time, but the consideration on the hours specifically, I know would be helpful for those who are affected by pandemic related issues. So that is a little perplexing to me.
Well, and I just wanted to point out, I'm looking at the bill right now. So the first section does say on or after January 1st, 2022, and then it speaks to the licensee postgraduate clinical supervision. But in the back of the book, back of the bill on page 34.
That's what it felt like to me, David.
Section 23 does say this act shall take effect and be in force from or after its publication in the statute book. So, I would
Thank
prefer our
you.
legal
It's kind of
counsel, but-
conflicting.
I looked all over that and I missed that section, but I wanted to bring that up today because I thought one of our intentions was also to provide some relief to licensees at this point, and I was concerned about that. So okay. How does that get resolved then?
You would, again, like David can tell you, I mean, you could talk to the revisor's office to say that that was a concern that was brought up at the board, or provide testimony to make that amendment when it goes to a committee. And the committee can amend it before it gets voted on.
Yeah, and I'll talk to Scott in the revisor's office because that language on January 1st, 2022, it does seem to be within the section of new section 1. But I will talk to Scott just to see, because I would think the section 23 would cover each of the different sections unless it had specific language, but I'm not 100% sure. So I'll talk to Scott and I'll check on that.
Thank you so much.
Good question. Good catch, Mary. Hey, David, also, since everything is being live streamed, could you send out to the board a link if you can get it ahead of time for our hearing on this bill so that folks could watch it?
Sure. Yeah, that
You're
will be
available?
that will be streamed to the legislative YouTube channel. So I'll go ahead and plan to send that out when it's posted before the meeting.
All right. Motion to adjourn?
So moved. This is Mary.
Second. Is that David? Is that David that's second?
Yes, I second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
All right. See you at the other link.